So I'm Ari Werder, and I'm an ed tech specialist in the Burlington Edison School District. I also get to help with our assistive technology and coordinating kind of our lending library and pieces of that. And I am a huge UDL champion. It is why I'm in education, and it is something that I was looking for the 20 plus years of teaching. So I'm really excited to be able to share and do this work together.
And hi, I'm Katie Dorr. I'm the Technology Integration Specialist for the Mount Vernon School District and currently our UDL professional development provider and lead for our district. And so I'm excited to be here to share some of the new learnings we've been doing and the work we've been doing in Mount Vernon over the last couple of years. And I'm excited to see Susan from Mount Vernon, who is here as well as part of our IT group, our assistive technology group. So it's great to have her here. She's a great resource as well. So we may ask you to pipe in from time to time too. So thank you all for being here.
So I'm Tracy Dabbs. I'm also with the Burlington Edison School District. Go Tigers. I am the coordinator of ed tech for our district. So I get to work with Ari and we support our staff with everything educational technology wise. And a few years ago, we got to start with this UDL journey and it has been a game changer. I have been teaching, I won't tell you how long, a super long time. Over 25 over 25 years. And UDL has been a game changer for me in my work in classrooms and in the PD that we are able to offer. It's just, I didn't think I was going to learn the new thing, right? That we were kind of where we were at, but this is a game changer. So we are super excited to share this work with you. Thanks so much. And shout out to Alejandro, my high school principal. So good to see you.
So we have this is part of a 4, right? We're going to meet 4 times with you. Hopefully you can attend all of them, but this is our first. So these are our goals for the entire, not just today, but for this entire book. The first is to explore the unlearning cycle, right? This is a difficult thing to unlearn something and to know that it's the right thing to do. And then reflect on our practices and how it can help us improve, both for ourselves and also systematically, right? How we can start making those changes. And our other goal is to dig into the foundational elements for universal design for learning. Likely everyone here is coming at a different level. Some of you might just be really hearing the inclusionary practices in UDL. Others might know a lot. So we're going to dig into those elements and really kind of have some grit to dig into.
Thanks, Ari. We also have just goals for this session. And the first goal we have is to begin to explore the importance of reflecting on our practice. It's just so essential to always moving forward and making improvements. And also we know so important for our students. So the more we can do that for ourselves and model for our students is pretty powerful. So the book really starts out with some of those reflective practice pieces. And then the second one we have for our session today is to also develop an understanding of learner variability. And this is one of the big foundational elements of UDL and one of those big whys for this work. So those are our 2 big goals for this session.
So as you guys came in, you had an opportunity to take a quick survey just to let us know a little bit more about you, who you are, where you come from.
So we're going to jump right into the book. It's okay if you didn't have a chance to read it. Hopefully you've had a chance to peruse it, but if not, that's okay too. Well, we're going to do 2 minutes of silence. Go ahead and jot this down, draw a picture, whatever is going to help you capture your thinking about this question. What was your initial experience when trying a new doing something new? Okay, so that was a question out of the book. We have 2 minutes now just to think about that initial experience when you tried doing something new. Last 10 seconds here, thinking about a time you tried something new, what it felt like, what you saw, what you noticed.
So we know how powerful it is to provide our students with some prior knowledge time, right? And giving themselves a chance to think about what they already know and get their brain activated. And now we're going to shift into some options for you. The first one, and I love how Ari added all these images here to also help us because we know we love Ari's support of reminding me of those visual supports for our learners. But the first option you have is that during these 8 minutes, you can work by yourself. You could just read and reflect and go back to the book. Like Ari said, if you didn't have a chance to finish reading, maybe you want to do that. Maybe you want to gather some notes on your own of that introduction and what new learning feels like. And that could be the option that you pick. Option 2 is to join a facilitated breakout group. In those groups, you'll either be in with me or with Ari or with Katie, and we're going to just have a conversation together and really have people be able to share and discuss what that introduction and learning something new meant for you. And then 3, you can actually join another group with just people in our group with us, but not a facilitated one, just a more informal and just chatting together.
So right now we're going to take a moment to kind of share out what are some of the themes that were shared within your groups. And so we'll start with facilitated group number 1. Do you guys have someone that you have chosen to share out some of the common themes that you've seen
Well,
throughout
Katie,
your
they
time?
nominated me. I had a lovely group that was willing to share, but they weren't ready to share with the whole group yet, which I completely
All
understand.
good. All
And
good.
I was nominated in my group too. So
Well, we offered to facilitate, so I heard Tracy putting the pressure
I
on behind her.
nominated Alejandro
I
for our
tried. I
group.
tried. Okay, but my group was awesome. We had a great discussion. We had 3 different kind of examples. One was jumping into school online, right? All of us that experienced that world a couple of years ago, like that was a crazy new experience. That was. We also had someone talk about just trying new strategies in general in the classroom. And third was the one about getting a new car that had a lot of tech on it, right? All 3 themes in it was this idea that it's kind of scary, right? And particularly the stress is when you think there's someone else that's an expert at it. Not as bad when you're all learning together, but there's this worry that somehow we're not going to do justice. We're not going to do our best in that. As we kind of go through it, the themes also was that we pick and choose, right? The best parts of the new thing, try to accept that, but then also like keep some of those other things in our back pocket that we know that worked from before. So that's kind of what all of them had that theme running through it.
and many of the same common themes came out with my group as well, in the terms of, especially when you're first starting out, there's kind of a nervousness, there's some anxiety around what's new and what's coming. Oftentimes there's some skepticism. Is this going to work? Is this not going to work? How is that going to go? But then as they start to get into the process, there starts to build some of that excitement, and they start to see those places where they start to get hopeful as well. And then we had a good conversation that a couple people have shared, is really going back to the why. Why are we trying these new experiences? Why are we making these shifts in our practice? And really understanding that foundational reason of why, which is part of a great reason why we wanted to start with this book. So I'm glad that they got to that. But understanding the why of what we're doing, and having our staff or other people we're working with really understand the why behind that as being very important.
And for us in group 3, a couple of themes that really came out of the conversation is that before you engage in something new, it's always the various different levels of anxiety based on what the topic is, what your experience might be with whatever you are attempting to do that is new to you. And then also on the other side, what is the motivation to engage in that new learning? What is it that you or in this case your students or somebody is going to gain from you learning whatever that new strategy, that new thing may be? So we looked at all of that, and also all of what other people have said about the anxiety, the hesitancy, the unwillingness sometimes to engage in those new tasks.
I just think it's so valuable for us to think about ourselves as learners, and then remembering those students we're working with, right? How we're even at this stage in life, right? I am super nervous about getting something wrong, or like Ari was saying, not doing something justice. And I'm getting pretty old. I should kind of have a little more confidence, but I don't. Learning something new puts us all back in this funny spot, right? So hopefully we can just remember that when we're with our students, of how that feels for them, and having that empathy and thinking about how we're creating those learning spaces. All right. So now we're going to dig into chapter 1 and do a little overview with you. All right. So I'm going to look at chapter 1. I'm on page 1 through 3, and I have a couple things that I've pulled out here that really resonated with me. And so this first part, remember she started with this Apple story and about how we I'll just have this idea that the apple is red, and then you go behind the science. And it just really resonated that learning new things, just like we talked about in our sessions, learning new things is really tough, right? We'll have our old habits that we just want to stick to, even if they're really bad. I mean, I've had some habits that are not doing me any favors, but I have them. They're like solid. It's really hard to kick those. And there's all this brain research around how much you have to try that new habit, right, for it to get stuck. And I can't remember if it's like 27 days or something crazy like that, that you have to literally retrain your brain for new habits. So learning that new thing is super tough. And it takes so much energy to do that. I mean, if you look on page number 2 on that bottom, that last paragraph, she really talks about how much deliberate energy and effort it takes to really change your mindset on something. It takes a lot of effort. It doesn't just happen by itself. And so it really makes me think of when we have teachers, even if we've been teaching for a little bit or a long time, we get into our habits and really questioning ourselves. Is our instruction working? I mean, I have a habit of doing something with my students all the time, and I just get into that mindset of using that. And I remember when I first started working with our high school crew, and I'm formerly a first and second grade teacher, so I love working with our high school staff. But when we first started looking at inclusion, we started talking about, oh, I already do that. I have those practices down. I've got it. Everything is working. And so then we started asking, well, who is it working for? Who should we be asking, right? Because a habit or instructional habit I have is working for me doesn't mean it's working for our students. And we did not have teachers that were asking feedback from our students. We weren't. We were taking just the way we felt after a lesson, right? So that's a really big piece that I pulled out of this one. The next couple pages 3 through 7, this learning buffet, if you've looked at UDL at all, this buffet thing comes up a ton, right? It's just having this amazing spread of opportunities for students, right? And just making sure that it's just all of these options for students. But I love on the top of page number 5, it's the second full paragraph where she's talking about UDL is not just about offering all these choices, right? We have to be super intentional. I see Billy shaking her head. Yep. I remember in my first stages of UDL, it was like, oh, just more choices. I've got it. I've got it. Oh, I pretty much sunk myself at the beginning with, I had so many choices. Remember, Ari, we had like all these resources, and then all we heard from people is, it's too much. I don't know what to pick, right? So we hadn't gone through and really thought about what is really that goal, right? Can I can I make sure there's options, but there's just not so much that it's just this crazy, overwhelming piece. So having that idea that we can have lots of ways to get to the same goal together, and there's many ways to get there. But then this idea of scaffolding that choice, right? Because working with some of my high school students that have never had an experience of having lots of choice, they were immobilized when they started having choice. So having those intentional options, teaching students how to actually make choices was just really eye-opening for us, right? On page number 6, they talk about how teachers are really worried that students won't make the right choice. Well, let's talk to them about that, right? Why are we making the choices we're making? And can we be reflective about the choices we're making so that it's not just this idea that, oh, my students are just going to pick the easy choice every time. No, how can we help them with that? How are we helping them build the opportunity to be expert consumers and learners of the choices that they make? And so I really loved that piece she had. And on page number 7, on that second paragraph, it's talking about really helping students not just choose that easy way, but the most effective for them, and having them become those expert learners that are advocates for themselves. So that's my section. I'm going to turn it over now to Katie. She's going to talk about her sections.
And I love how you brought up, and that's one of the things I love when Katie Novak talks about when learners are going to choose the easy choices, that there shouldn't be any easy choices. When we're designing and we're embracing the variability of our learners, there's no easy choice. There's no easy way out. It's the choice that they're going to pick, and students knowing themselves and having that agency to be able to pick the choice that's going to be right for them in that moment. So chapters or pages 8 through 10 talk about moving from labels to variability. And oftentimes I am in classrooms, and I know I might have said it back in my days in the classroom as well. Well, I do these things for my special education students. Well, I do these things for my multilingual learners. Well, I do these things. So I provide these things for this small group of students. And so chapter pages 8 through 10, talks about moving from labels to variability. I also come from the day, and I gave my kid choices when I was first, we did the quiz when I was first teaching in middle school. Are you a visual learner? Are you a kinesthetic learner? What kind of learner are you? And there's been current brain research that shows that there are no labels in learning. There's variabilities within each of the learning styles and that people have. So as we're moving forward with that brain research, it shows that each human brain is unique and variability is the rule. And even if you do make specific scaffolds for your multilingual learners, you have variability within your multilingual learners that scaffold may not meet all of their needs. And if those scaffolds are there to help with your multilingual learners, why shouldn't other students who might struggle with that specific task, why shouldn't they have that option to choose that if they so choose? And so moving away from this idea that we provide scaffolds and supports to just students who need it, to providing scaffolds and supports for all students in our classrooms and teaching them to be expert learners and have student agency to be able to make the right choice that's going to work for them in the moment. So on that next slide, I'm talking about, and if you look at that picture, and later in the book, and we'll share in some of the resources you can look at, we've got some resources that talk about the myth of average and how oftentimes in traditional classrooms, we teach to the average, and we see some kids as high and some kids as low. But really, when you look at their learning profile, we need to be thinking of it as a jagged learning profile, depending on the context, depending on the subject matter, depending on the environment, depending on what happened at home that morning before they left, is going to make a difference as to how they enter your classroom and how they're ready to learn the new content that's being presented. So we need to be able to anticipate the barriers and all of the different things in our jagged profile of learners that we have in our classrooms to try to figure out what kind of options and opportunities can we provide within the buffet, as Tracy had mentioned, to be able to provide opportunities for all of our learners, whether what we're learning that day is a strength of theirs or whether that's something that they struggle with. How can we be sure that we have options for all of our kids that they can be successful to reach grade level content standard within that day?
So what I love about the way Katie Novak writes, right, or Dr. is sort of like, we're in this point. So we've got all this good data, right? We just talked about learner variability and what it is. And then there's this sort of like, yeah, great. That all sounds wonderful, but let's really talk about how do we internalize that and how does it actually change our practice? And so she talks about this discrepant event, right? It starts out with this at the ice cream store, and this teacher going in and saying, yeah, I learned about variability. But I had to do this for my SPED students, right? I've made shorter, I changed the Lexile for these students. I did this. I thought about Johnny. I thought about Ari. I thought about Tracy. I thought about Katie, and I've prepped all of these lessons, and I have a specialist coming in. I have all these people doing all these things so that my classroom can run, because teachers care about teaching, right? I mean, educators are in it because we care about kids and we want to do the best we can for them. And so they've put in all this extra time and Saturdays and nights and all those other things to do it. But this discrepant event for this teacher in this case is this ice cream store, right? And if I look at this picture, if we walk into the classroom and there's all these beautifully planned ice cream desserts there, right? And instead of getting to pick the one you feel like eating that day, you're handed one because you walk in, hey, well, Ari, you're blonde, so you get this, right? Like, wait a second, that's not how it's supposed to work. But I want that chocolate one, or I want the non-dairy one, or I want so we have all of these amazing options. And yet, and this is what Katie was talking about, was this idea that all of a sudden we have labeled our students in our brains, not because we don't care about them, because we are trying to get them what we think they need. But really the goal here is this expert learner that sometimes we know a lot. We ask you guys to feel how do you learn best at the beginning, but next time when you come in, you might say, you know what, today I can't talk to anybody. I had a really tough day with my students or one of my staff members, and I just need to listen. So that's going to change. And so when we have these discrepant events and we go, oh, that's what we mean. So that's what UDL is, right? This idea that we have options for everyone versus differentiated instruction where we are pre-planning and we have an idea and a label that's going on. Okay, so that idea that everyone has an opportunity for this. We know we're going to have ML students. We know we're going to have special ed students. We know we're going to have highly gifted. We know we're going to have kids that didn't get sleep last night, right? And so if we plan for those environments for everyone, someone is going to find something that they can grab onto for that day. And we're a little behind, and we are really all very passionate about this, so we could talk for a long time. So what this is on page 13 kind of is this moment to stop and think about what this chapter was about. Okay, the first step is we need to look at UDL. Okay, what we talked about today, that first thing is about learning about what learner variability is, and that there is this really cool piece that we can look at and put our instruction in and hold up against and try to make some steps with it. And the other piece is understanding context. Just because I'm a good reader in math or in English does not mean I'm a good reader when I go to Spanish class or even when I'm going to social studies, that I may be using different skills at different times based on the context. Time and place and the night before impacts us as a learner in a moment. And for all of us on this stage, and as we're asking staff members or ourselves to start thinking about our practice, that chapter ends with the quote, which I thought was powerful. It's typically not a spot we aren't making changes, right? Because we still have a lot more learning to do. We're just starting to absorb this idea that, oh, I have to shift my thinking. That's kind of hard. Even though I think I want to do it, maybe I don't. So that's kind of a recap of what we pulled from these chapters.
Thanks so much, Ari. And I super appreciate how you put in this graphic of the unlearning cycle and how we're traveling through this book together. And so this first step, just like Ari said, and Katie really dug into this idea of just understanding learner variability, right? So we had you think about it for yourself, right? And how learning, what happens to me when I have new learning, and thinking about this jagged profile. And like Ari said, it's not that at this phase, you're being asked to change your practice. But just like our goal for our session, it's reflecting now. Let's reflect on our practice, reflect on what we believe. So now what we want to do, now that we've kind of given you our favorite parts and what we pull from the text, now you're going to go into an exploration activity. And again, we want to make sure we're providing some choices for you. So again, you get to select a group that makes sense for you. And the question from the book, what resonates with you so far in your learning about UDL? And thinking about the big thing we've been talking about is variability and context of learning. Is there a first step you could take? Maybe you've already been taking some steps. So those are a couple questions you can consider. Also, if you have another question you want to dig into as well. Deborah, will you share out?
So the buffet doesn't work for me. We've been working through UDL for several years now in our district, and I'm part of leading the professional development around that. And it just doesn't work for my brain, and that's okay. But Alejandro was talking about the GPS analogy, and that one works for me. And we just have a picture of the map and that we're all going to the same place, but there's multiple ways to get there, and that's much more clear to me. Somebody in our district shared once that we don't all wear the same swimsuit to the beach. Thank goodness.
That's a great one too.
But we're all going to have fun at the beach.
And we had a great reflection in our group of just being able to understand that looking at context is important, and how students can be super excited and successful in one class, and you see the same student not engaged and motivated in another class. And talking about that variability and looking at context and environment.
And our group talked about really liking the video. I saw it popped up again, the end of the average, right? This is based on the myth of the average, but it really links back in that piece. So if you haven't watched that video, I highly recommend it. It's one that I think educators can connect with. So it's a great piece.
And remember, you have access to that website whenever you want, and we'll be adding more things every session. So we want to know from you how things worked in our session. We want to know from you, did we meet our goal? Our first goal was reflecting on practice, yes, no, thanks. Nice graphics, Ari. I really like that. And then did we meet our second goal on starting to build an understanding of learner variability? And then what worked well for you during this session? We're trying to build in some UDL strategies, and we're going to talk about them in just a minute. If you stick with us, we're going to unpack some of the strategies we used. But what worked well for you? And then what can we do to improve these sessions? I mean, it's tough for me. I love being in person, but knowing we can't be and we can still get to meet, how can we make sure this is an amazing session for you, even though we get to be on Zoom together, right? So
and we will
please
use
take a
all
minute.
that information because our next slide says join us October 19th. So mark your calendars, chapter 2 and 3.
Woo!
So we're going to take that information you give us and we're going to directly try to be ready for you. And then our next one.
Yes, and in my district, working with Alejandro and our high school staff, we give them feedback surveys every single session. And we went from a staff that had 30% approval of our PD to 100% in a high school staff because we asked them. And basically that feedback, you're having the learner help you design the session. It's not just you. So feedback, see, I already jumped into the next one, Ari, of what UDL practices are we using? Feedback to me has been a game changer. I actually got a chance to have an article published on Edutopia about the things that we were doing in Burlington Edison, about how feedback has been a night and day change for our high school staff. Even if you did no instructional change yet, but you just asked students how things were working for them and you talked about it, had a huge impact on engagement. And not just with our students, but with our staff, huge impacts. So for me, one of the biggest changes in UDL is just asking the learner, how are things working for you? Doing a learner survey. What works for you typically when you are in a learning setting? So for me, that's the biggest one I want to pull out from the session that we tried to do. Is we did a learner survey with you at the beginning. We're going to use that. And we did this feedback survey at the end. And so watch us next time. We're going to show you how we are responding to your feedback. But for me, huge.
Tracy, we are getting some comments based on the question that's on
Oh
the
my
screen.
gosh.
One person commented that being in chat, just being able to chat, didn't work for them. So next time they're going to try to use a Chromebook, right? So changing the mode in which they're interacting with us, which is great. So we had a comment that people liked the type of breakouts that they could join, which was a UDL strategy, right? Providing option and choice for them.
Options, like we said, options are huge with UDL, but it's also intentional options, right? We wanted to make sure everyone was discussing that part of the book, but like Ari had said, maybe you don't want to talk with anybody, but you're still going to use some scaffolds to look at this. Other people want to chat or want a facilitated chat. So we really tried to give you that opportunity to pick the best fit for you. And it might be a totally different fit next time, right?
Was there anything else that people noticed before we just tell you what we thought we did? Were there any things that people noticed? You can type it, you can just shout it out. What did you notice about this session and anything you know already about UDL?
Oh, I love how Rachel said intentional options was a huge light bulb moment for me. Yes.
Yeah, and for me, doing it in Zoom is one of those scary things. So we just had a comment, right? Experiencing it in an actual having PD that models what we're asking teachers to do in a classroom, right? Super hard.
Don't you love the teacher PD where they say, okay, we're going to share something with you, but we're not going to model it the way we should. Sorry.
Oh, it started
we're just
in
going to
teacher
do
training.
It's like, that's so evil.
Don't lecture your kids. What do we get in college?
And then we do a whole
Don't give them long tests. What do they give us to become a teacher? A giant skills test that, right? Like all the things they say we don't do. It starts, that starts right at the beginning.
Yeah. So it was really fun starting with our high school teachers with our PD and modeling it and then having that light bulb go off of, oh my gosh, you're actually like modeling the strategies with us, right? Yes. And if you have if you have this movement going on in your district, the more you can get to your PD and modeling your PD this same way, that's how you leverage change, right? Did you notice
having partners, right?
Yes.
Like it is scary to get on Zoom and try to model this. So thank goodness I have you. Thank goodness I have Katie. Thank goodness we have Kristen, right? That's another huge one for me. You don't have to go these things alone, right? We talked about changing and unlearning, but having partners is really helpful.
Did you notice that we were like really intentional with our goals? at the beginning of our session, and it was in our feedback. That is huge with UDL, is making sure that all of your learners know what the learning is about, right? And then checking
why, and
why.
getting at that understanding of the why, and the why that's important. And that surfaced the couple different times in the conversations that I had with some members of my group. And I think getting to the why, if the kids don't see the connections, that's where you're going to get the motivation piece. They need to understand why they're there, what they're learning, why it's important to them.
Yeah, that really came up in our groups. With my first group, pretty much everybody said I had to have a purpose, right? What was the purpose of the learning? That was super powerful. Yep. And Rachel shared, yes, the why is the first column in the UDL guidelines, that engagement piece. If you don't engage first, forget it. You could have some wonderful choices, but if you're, and if you have seen like the old UDL framework, engagement used to be last. And then they realized, oh my gosh, engagement has to be first. If you don't capture that learner, engage that learner, give purpose for that learner, it doesn't matter how great your choices are. It doesn't matter how many options you give them to demonstrate learning.
I also want to add, having those visual pieces are in there. The dilemma, don't overpopulate it so that it's hard on brains. Like Tracy's very vertical, right? And then still putting those images. So we tried to balance that in our presentation of having some images for people as well as the written piece, and then knowing how to turn on the closed caption.
Oh, it's 5 o'clock. I want to keep,
5 o'clock.
I want to keep going, but I am just so thrilled that we get to see you all again very soon.
So many people have stayed on. We
Yes.
appreciate it. Really, really appreciate you being here and look forward to getting to connect with you again next week.